Ever feel like when you're stressed out, it's harder to remember details? Like, something happened, but the specifics are just fuzzy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, it turns out there's some really interesting research that suggests that stress actually changes how our brains form memories.
Really?
Yeah, we're diving into a study from Cell Press today called Stress Scrambles Memories.
Okay.
And it's full of fascinating insights about this.
I'm interested to hear about this.
So the researchers in this study, they worked with mice. And they trained the mice to connect certain sounds with either a stressful experience or just a neutral one.
Okay. Kind of like Pavlov's dogs, but with sounds instead of bells.
Exactly. And then they watched how the mice reacted to those sounds later on. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The mice who had been through that stressful experience, they reacted defensively to both sounds, even the one that wasn't linked to anything negative. It was like their memories just got all jumbled up.
So it's like they couldn't differentiate between the sound that was associated with the negative experience and the one that wasn't.
Yeah, and it really suggests that stress was preventing them from forming these specific, distinct memories.
Interesting.
Instead, they had this generalized fear response.
Okay, so, that feeling of being stressed and then everything just seems like a blur? This study suggests that's not just a feeling. Stress is actually changing how your brain is forming memories.
It's a great analogy.
Thanks.
It really kind of captures that sense of like knowing something was bad, but not remembering the clear details.
Yeah.
All right, so we see that stress leads to these generalized memories, but what's actually happening in the brain?
Right.
Well, that's where this hormone called corticosterone comes in.
Okay.
And corticosterone, this is a hormone that gets released when we're stressed. It's like your body's alarm bell. It's signaling, hey, something's not right.
Okay.
And the researchers found a direct link between corticosterone and these generalized memories.
No.
They injected mice with corticosterone, basically bypassing any kind of real stressful experience.
Oh, wow.
And those mice still showed that same inability to form those specific memories.
So even without a real stressor, just having that hormone present was enough to kind of mess with their memory.
Exactly.
How?
And to make things even more interesting,
Okay.
they then blocked corticosterone production in stressed mice using a drug. And guess what?
What?
The effect was reversed.
No, wow.
Those mice were able to once again form those distinct memories.
That's really interesting.
So it really points to corticosterone as playing a key role in this whole process of how stress is impacting our memory.
Yeah.
But how does it actually do that? What's going on at the cellular level?
Well, that's where the concept of engrams comes in.
Engrams.
Yeah, so you might be wondering, how does stress actually change these memories? Well, scientists have discovered these things called engrams, and they're like these tiny networks of neurons, little groups of brain cells that essentially hold specific memories.
So each memory has its own little engram file folder in the brain.
Exactly. Imagine each memory you have is like a file in your brain.
Okay.
Engrams are like those files.
Got it.
And what the researchers found is that stress makes these engrams larger. They involve more neurons than they normally would.
So instead of a neat little file folder, it's like someone dumped the contents of several folders together.
Exactly.
No wonder things get jumbled up.
Yeah, and the reason for this dumping effect is that stress impairs what are called inhibitory interneurons.
Inhibitory interneurons.
Yeah, you can think of these interneurons as like the brain's organizers.
Okay.
They usually keep engrams distinct and separate, but under stress they don't work quite as well.
So those interneurons are like those color-coded dividers that you might use to keep your files organized.
Yes, exactly like that.
Stress comes along, knocks the dividers over, and suddenly everything's mixed up.
That's a perfect analogy.
That's how those memories start to blend together under stress, creating that generalized sense of what happened instead of clear, distinct recollection.
Exactly.
But wait, there's another piece of the puzzle.
Okay.
Endocannabinoids.
Ah, yes. This is where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
Remember corticosterone, the stress hormone?
Huh?
Well, it triggers the release of these endocannabinoids in a part of the brain called the amygdala,
The amygdala.
which is like the brain's emotion center.
Okay, so stress hormones are triggering other chemicals in the emotion hub of our brains.
That's right.
This is sounding like a chain reaction.
It is. And these endocannabinoids, they're actually responsible for messing with those inhibitory interneurons we were just talking about.
So they're the reason those organizers get thrown off and the memories blend together.
Exactly. And what researchers found is that by manipulating endocannabinoid receptors in just one specific brain region, they could actually restore memory specificity in the mice.
Wow. So even though it's this complex chain reaction, there might be very targeted ways to interrupt it and prevent this memory scrambling from happening.
That's the incredible potential here. This opens up so many possibilities for future research and potentially for new treatments for conditions like post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD and other anxiety disorders.
It's pretty amazing to think about.
It is.
Imagine being able to prevent those traumatic memories from becoming overgeneralized so people with PTSD don't constantly feel triggered by vaguely similar situations.
It would be groundbreaking, and this research is really just the beginning.
Yeah.
It has the potential to truly transform our understanding of how stress impacts our brains and our lives.
So we've been talking about how stress can lead to these more generalized memories. But, it's not just about forgetting the details of a stressful event, right? There are kind of broader consequences for how we experience and interact with the world.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If our brains are mainly forming these broad generalized memories when we're stressed, it makes it tough to know the difference between situations that are really threatening and those that just kind of resemble something bad from our past.
So it's not that we're forgetting details. It's more like our brain might overreact to something happening now because it seems similar to a past stressful experience, even if what's happening now is totally harmless.
Exactly. It's like our internal alarm system gets a little too sensitive and it starts going off for no real reason just because it's working with these blurry, generalized memories.
Wow. I can see how this could really lead to more anxiety and even phobias. It's like your brain gets stuck in that better safe than sorry mode, constantly on high alert for danger.
Precisely. And that kind of chronic hypervigilance can be really draining both mentally and physically. It can affect your energy, your focus, even your sleep.
This is making so much sense now. I'm thinking about times I was super stressed and maybe overreacted to something that, looking back, wasn't a big deal.
It's interesting how research like this can give us new insights into our own experiences.
Totally. And speaking of new insights, I'm curious about the potential implications for mental health treatments you mentioned. Could you talk more about how this research could lead to new therapies for things like PTSD and anxiety?
Absolutely. One exciting area is developing therapies that could target the specific brain mechanisms we've been talking about. Imagine preventing those generalized memories from forming, or even helping to unscramble them after they've formed.
That would be amazing. To help people process traumatic memories in a way that reduces their impact and keeps those memories from becoming overwhelming triggers.
It's a powerful possibility. And it's not just about treatment either. This research could also help us develop better prevention strategies.
How so?
Well, if we understand how stress affects memory, we might be able to come up with ways to reduce those effects and build resilience so people can cope better.
That would be incredible. To be able to give people the tools to handle stress without it having such a lasting impact on their memories.
It's a really promising area for future research.
Okay, I'm getting excited about all the possibilities. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go back to some of the questions the researchers raised. For instance, they mentioned looking into whether stress affects positive memories the same way.
That's a fascinating question. What if instead of just fear, our brains also generalize positive emotions? Imagine experiencing something joyful, but not remembering specifics, just that feeling of happiness.
I wonder if that would be a good thing or a bad thing. On one hand, maybe it helps us hold on to a feeling of well-being even when happy memories fade. But it would be sad to lose the details that make those moments unique.
It's a tricky question. It shows how much we still don't know about emotions, memory, and stress.
Definitely. The researchers also mentioned wanting to study whether external cannabinoids like cannabis affect memory the same way endocannabinoids do. That seems like it could have big implications for how we think about cannabis use, especially with PTSD.
It's a really relevant and important area for research, but it needs to be approached carefully.
For sure. We need to understand how different types of cannabinoids dosages and individual brain chemistry play a role.
Right, and it's key to have a balanced view, recognizing both the potential benefits of cannabis and the risks, especially for memory and thinking.
It all comes back to understanding the brain and how it responds to stress. So we've been on quite the journey, haven't we? Exploring all these connections between stress and memory.
It really is fascinating how much is going on in our brains that we're not even aware of.
We've learned about corticosterone, those engrams, and even endocannabinoids, all playing a role in how our brains form memories under stress.
Yeah, it's pretty complex stuff.
But, it's not just about understanding the science. It's about what it all means for us in our daily lives.
Exactly. How can we actually use this knowledge to make our lives better?
That's the key question, isn't it? We've talked about how stress can literally rewire our memories, shifting us from specific, detailed recollections to these more general impressions.
Yep. Right. And it's not just forgetting details. It's about how that shift can actually change how we see and react to the world around us.
Think about it. If your brain is forming these kind of broad, fuzzy memories when you're stressed, it can make it harder to tell the difference between a situation that's truly dangerous
Right.
and one that just vaguely reminds you of something negative from the past.
Yeah, like your brain might overreact to something that's totally harmless because it triggers that vague feeling of unease from a past experience.
Exactly. You might find yourself getting anxious or stressed out in a situation that doesn't actually warrant that kind of reaction.
Right. It's like your stress response system is stuck in overdrive even when there's no real threat.
So what can we do about it? If stress is literally changing how our brains form memories, are we just kind of stuck with this fuzzy recall and heightened anxiety?
Well, not necessarily. This research actually gives us some really exciting possibilities for both preventing these negative effects and intervening after they've happened.
Okay, I'm definitely interested in hearing more about that.
Well, first off, this study really highlights how important it is to manage stress, not just for our overall well-being, but specifically for the sake of our memory.
That makes sense. If stress is behind these generalized memories, then finding ways to reduce and manage stress could help us form clearer, more specific memories.
Exactly. It's like giving your brain a break so it can process information more accurately.
So what kind of things can we do to manage stress more effectively?
It really depends on the person. But things like mindfulness meditation, regular exercise, spending time in nature, and getting enough sleep can make a big difference.
It's all about finding what works for you to help you feel more grounded and less reactive.
Exactly. And this research also has implications for how we design environments, especially those where learning takes place.
Oh, that's an interesting angle. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, if we know that stress impairs memory, then creating learning environments that are calm, supportive, and minimize pressure can really help.
It's like setting the stage for optimal brain function.
Right, precisely. And it applies to all kinds of learning environments, from classrooms to workplaces to online courses.
So this research could potentially transform how we think about education and learning as a whole.
It really could. And on a broader level, this study also raises questions about how we address stress as a society.
That's a really crucial point. It's not just about individual responsibility. It's about recognizing the larger factors that contribute to chronic stress for some people.
Think about poverty, discrimination, trauma. These are all chronic stressors that can shape how people's brains process and store memories.
It's a reminder that mental health, social justice, and even economic opportunity are all interconnected.
Exactly. This seemingly simple study about mice and memories has really broad implications for how we understand and address some of the biggest challenges facing our society.
It's powerful stuff. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a few questions to ponder.
Okay.
Think about your own experiences. Have you noticed times when stress made it harder to remember things? And knowing what we know now about how stress affects the brain, how might you approach those stressful situations differently in the future?
Those are really great questions for everyone to consider.
Well, it's been a fascinating journey exploring the world of stress and memory. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the mysteries of the brain.